Alright guys, so in this section we're going to start to look at, I guess, more advanced parts of CSS or things that you're not going to use as much. They're not as common, but you should still know. And in this video we're going to look at targeted selectors or just different ways of selecting elements than we've already learned. So I'm going to create a new file, and what I've done is I've created a folder called CSS Sandbox 2 just because the CSS Sandbox that we've been working with is really filling up, so I just figured I'd start a new one for this section. So let's create a file called one underscore, and we'll call this targeted, let's say targeted underscore selectors.html. And we're going to just put in our boilerplate here, and let's change the title, targeted selectors, and we'll go ahead and put our style tags in. Now the HTML for this is going to be really weird, but I'm doing it for a reason because I want to show you how to select certain parts of it. So we're going to create a div, and in this div we'll have a paragraph with, we'll just do lorem, something really short, just lorem 5. And then under that I'm going to put a UL, and let's do list item. For the content we'll say item and an increment in number, so $, and let's do 3, so we'll do times 3 and enter. Alright, and then under the UL we're going to put another paragraph with lorem 5. I also want to make this item 2, I want to wrap that in a paragraph tag as well. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a few minutes. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to put one more paragraph under the div. Okay, so outside of the div. Okay, so up in the style here, if we do div p like this, you guys, you know what this is going to do. It's going to look for any paragraph that's inside of a div, right? So I'm just going to put a background of, let's do gray. Let's save it. Let's open this up with Live Server. And I'm actually going to just make this a little bigger so you guys can see it better. So what's going on here is every paragraph within a div has the gray background. If we look at the markup here, this paragraph is in the div, this paragraph is in the div, this one is in the div, this last one is not, so that doesn't pertain to this selector. Now, what if we wanted to select a paragraph that was directly in a div? It was a direct child of the div. So to do that, let me just put a comment here. We'll say direct child. To do that, what we could do is just add a greater than sign, an angle bracket here, and this is saying that we only want a paragraph that is a direct child of a div. So let's save that, and you can see that the middle one here, this disappeared because it no longer pertains to that, because this item, or I'm sorry, this paragraph, its direct parent is a list item. Okay, whoops, didn't mean to do that. It's a list item, even though it is in this div, it's not the direct parent. Okay, the direct parent is a list item, then that parent is the UL, and then that parent is the div. So at the same time, we can also select something that is directly after an element, so something that's on the same level. So let's say directly after, and I'm going to say div, and I'm going to use a plus sign here and then a P, and let's change the background to we'll just do dark, we'll do dark gray, and then we'll do color white. So let's save that and see what happens. So the last paragraph is affected by this selector right here, and the reason for that is we're saying we want a paragraph where the element right before it is a div. Okay, now you might be saying, what about this one? There's a div here. This is a child of the div. Okay, so this paragraph is inside the div, which makes it a child. This one is a sibling of this div. They're on the same level. This is not inside of it. So that's what this pertains to, is basically a sibling. Okay, so the next sibling. All right. Now the next thing I want to show you is how we can add attributes as selectors. So I'm actually going to add some more markup down here under the paragraph. I'm going to put a couple links. So this is, we'll just go nowhere. I'm just going to say page 1. We'll just pretend it's a link to, you know, another page on the site. So page 2, and then let's do another link. For this one, let's have it go to Google. And for the text, we'll say Google. All right, now usually when you have an external link, you're going to have a target attribute and set it to underscore blank, and that will take it off the, it won't redirect you within the same tab. It'll open up another tab. And if we wanted to style this based on it having a target attribute, we could do that. So let's go up here and let's say by attribute. So I could say I want all the A tags that have an attribute of target. And then I want to add a background of, let's do red. And we'll make the color white. Okay, so if I save that, notice that the Google link now has a red background, and that's because it has a target on it. Now, if I were to add a target to this one here, let's say target, this time let's set it to underscore self. We'll save, and it gets a red background because it does have the target. Now, in addition to this, you can also you can reference the actual value. So if we want to say where the target is equal to underscore blank and save, you'll see that now Google is the only one that has the red background because we're saying the target has to be blank, where this one is actually self. Okay, and I'm going to give you a more practical example of this, so I'm just going to put that back like that. And then let's go down here and let's say specific attribute values. And where I use this the most is with forms, or form inputs, I should say. So I'm going to just add some line breaks here, and let's add a form. And we're just going to have a couple inputs. So let's say input with the type of text, and we don't need a name or ID. I will put a placeholder, and we'll just say name, and then I'll copy this down 2 more times. This one will be an email. I'm also going to change the type to email, which is similar to a text field. This one is actually going to be a submit. I want this to be a button to submit, so it's not going to have a placeholder. However, it needs a value because that's the text that is displayed. All right, so we'll save that, and we get this right here. So let's say I want the name and the email input to be 100% width and add a little bit of margin. So if I were to just do input and say width 100% and then say margin bottom, we'll do like, I don't know, 5 pixels. And if we were to save that, you'll see that all of these, this is going to pertain to all of them because they're all inputs. They have different types, but they're all inputs. So we may want to target certain types. And in this case, I want the name field and the email to have the 100%, but not the button itself. So what I would do, and this is something that is pretty common for me, is I would say input where the type equals text. If I do that, only the name extends because it has a type of text, but then we could put a comma. We could say input where the type equals email and save, and now both the name and the email are 100%. In a lot of cases, if it's like a contact form, you'd also do the text area as well. But yeah, so that's how we can target specific values of attributes. Okay, and it doesn't have to be input with a type; it can be any attribute at all. Why did that change? What did I do wrong here? Oh, there we go. All right. So, I mean, these are just some other methods to target certain things in the DOM to style. You're not going to be using these as much, obviously, but you may run into a situation where they could help you out. All right, so in the next video, we're going to talk about a special pseudo selector or pseudo class called nth child. All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to look at a pseudo selector or pseudo class called nth child. So I'm going to go ahead in our CSS Sandbox 2 and create a new file called 02_nth_child.html. And I'm going to change this targeted selectors. I'm just going to do 0, 1 just to stay consistent here. All right, so in the nth child file, let's go ahead and generate our head and body tags. We'll say nth child, and we want our style tags. Now, as far as the HTML, what I'm going to do is just have a UL, and I want about 20 list items. So I'm going to say li, I'm going to use Emmet here, and the content will be item and then an incremental number, and I'm going to say times 20 and then hit enter. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open this up. We'll save it, open with live server. Now I'm going to add some base styling for the list item. So I just want to add some padding. We'll say 0.25 rem and margin. Oops, not margin. 0.25 rem. And let's just take away the bullet items with list style none. All right, now we've seen first child and last child, so I'm just gonna refresh your memory if you forget what these do. Basically, we can select the first and last element, and it doesn't have to be a list item. I'm just using list items. It could be divs, it could be whatever, any element at all. But we're gonna say li, and then the pseudo selector syntax is a colon, so we want to say first child, and let's say background. Let's just do background red. I'll just use color names here. So that selects the first one, and if we want the last one, we'll copy that, and we'll just do last child and save, and now the last one's red. But what about all of these? You know, what if we want to choose the fourth one, or every second one, every even one, every odd one? For that, we can use nth child, and nth is basically like a kind of like a placeholder. So let's say position 3. So to do that, we can say list item, and we're going to say nth dash child, and we're just going to pass in 3. Okay, and then I'm going to say background. And let's do a different color. We'll do purple and save. And notice that the third one down is purple. Okay, so what if we wanted to do every 3? Okay, not just the third one, but every third one we want to do. So in that case, let's say every 3. So we could say nth child, and we can say 3n plus 0. This is basically the formula that we're going to use here. And let's say background, and we'll do orange. If I save that, notice that every third one is orange, and it replaced this one here, position 3, because it's further down. So it just kind of overrode it. If I put important here and save, then that's going to overwrite that. Now this formula that we passed in here is the counter. So this is the counter, and then 0, this is the offset, okay? Because we can offset, we can start it wherever we want. In this case, we're starting it at 0, and as a shortcut, we can just do 3n. So if I save that, we're going to get the same result. Now let's say that I want to do every 3, but I want it to start after the 7th item here. So let's put a comment in here. We'll say every 3 after 7. So to do that, we can put in nth child and then pass in 3n, and we want to do plus 7, which is our offset. Okay, and then I'll do background yellow. And we'll save that. And notice that the yellow starts here. Okay, so this 7, this is the offset. We're basically going to we're not going to start it until we hit that 7th item, and then we're going to do every 3. Now, a more common thing you're probably going to do is even and odd. So let's say every odd. So we could do li nth child, and we could pass in odd. And let's do background. We'll do a light gray. and save, and now every odd item here is going to be light gray. Now it's probably pretty obvious that we can do even as well, so let's do that. Let's do even, and we'll change this to, let's do a shade darker, or shade lighter actually, and save, and now every even is the this DDD light gray. All right, so nth child can be pretty handy. I remember before nth child was actually a thing, we had to use JavaScript to dynamically select every other element. And it was just a pain in the neck, guys. If you're learning HTML and CSS now, you've missed a lot of just giant pains in the asses, because things weren't, I mean, you know, these selectors weren't around. Even like border radius wasn't around. To do things like even placeholders in our forms, in our input forms, we didn't have the placeholder attribute before HTML5, so we would have to use JavaScript to have a value in, but then add a click event, so when we clicked in, the value went away, which was just a giant pain in the neck. So you guys are lucky, those of you that are learning this now, that you don't have to go through that stuff. And then browser compatibility is a whole new issue. All right, so that's the basis of nth child. In the next video, we're going to look at the before and after pseudo selector and look at some practical uses for that. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to take a look at the before and after pseudo selector, which actually allows us to insert content before or after an element. So I'm going to create a new file here called 03_before_after.html. And let's put our boilerplate in here. Say before and after. Okay. So, like I said, it allows us to put something before and after. And I'm going to give you some practical examples. So, one example would be where we have a form and there's some fields that are required, and you may have seen this before, but there'll be like some kind of mark, like an asterisk or something, where the fields are actually required. So what I'm going to do is just put in a label, and we'll just say for name, and I'm going to give this a class of is-required. Okay, and then here we'll just say name, and then after the label, we'll put an input, type text. That's it. We don't need anything else. So let's save this and open it. So a good example of a practical use for this would be to put an asterisk after the label, like right here, and we could even style it. We could color it red, for instance. So let's take our isRequired class. So we'll say, whoops, we want .is required, and I'm sorry, we want to do is required, and then we want to do colon after. Okay, we want it to be after. And then in here, it takes in a property called content, which I'm going to make an asterisk. So we're just going to put, whoops, wrong character. We're going to put an asterisk in here. And let's just save that and see what happens. So notice that the asterisk actually gets put in here, and it's not in the markup. If we open up our dev tools here and we go to the elements tab and we take a look at the label, let's see, we want to look at the HTML, so I'm going to just bring this down. If you look at the label, we have a label and then input. There's no asterisk in the markup at all. It's being inserted into the view here in the browser through CSS. And then we can also style it. We should have a semicolon here, but we can style it. We could say like color red, and if I save that, it's now red. We might want to push it over a little, so we could add some padding -left. We'll say like 2 pixels and save, and it pushes it over. So I think that's a pretty practical use, because then you can go ahead and just give any, like let's say we had 6, 7 fields, whatever ones were required, you could simply give a class of isRequired, and it would automatically have this asterisk. You don't have to worry about going into your markup and actually adding an asterisk in your HTML. Okay, so that's one practical use. And just to show you, if I did before and save, it does the same thing, it just puts it before. Now, another really practical use for before is to do an overlay, an image overlay. Now, we did an overlay in the Edge Ledger project, but we didn't use before. We just kind of did it on that element. But I'm gonna give you an example of how we would do this. So I'm gonna comment this out. We don't want this element. We're gonna do kind of a little landing page here. So let's put a header. And in the header, we'll do an H1. We'll say, hello world. Let's do a paragraph. I'll do lorem 10. And then under that header, let's do a section. And we'll put an H3. I'll just say lorem 3. And then we'll do a paragraph. And let's do lorem 30. Okay, so we'll save that. And I'm actually going to bring this back down to 100%. I did have this zoomed in. So I'm going to bring that back down. And then let's add some core styles. So I'm going to add some styles to the body. Just 'cause I want it to look somewhat decent and realistic. So let's say font family. We'll use Arial for our font. And let's give it a background. We're giving the body a background of dark and a color of white. All right, and then for the header itself, just go right here, we'll say header. I'm gonna display as flex. As soon as I do that, it's gonna go horizontal, but we want the flex direction to be a column. Okay, so if I save that, it goes back to that direction. And we want to justify content center. I just want to move everything to the center. So this is stuff we've already done. We're just setting it up. So we want to align items to the center. And we want to text align to the center as well. And then let's add a height of 100 viewport heights. So we'll save that. Good. The font size of the H1 I just want to increase, so I'm going to say header H1. Now we could use, if you want, you can use greater than. It doesn't really make a difference, but sometimes you'll see that people like to do that, which means that it's a direct child of header. So let's say font size for rem, and let's say margin 1 rem. And I'm just going to zero out the margin on the body as well. So I'm going to take an image, and first of all, I'm going to add it to just the header itself. And I'm going to show you what the problem with that is. So let's get an image from source.unsplash.com. And if we go down, let's see, from a collection, let's do this random search term. So if we grab this nature water random search term, and let's put a background of URL, put that in there, and we'll say no repeat, because we don't want it to repeat. We want to center on the X and Y axis, and then we want it to cover the whole, we want to show the whole image. So if I save that, we get a picture of some water here. Now, I want this is actually nice because we can read the text fine, but a lot of times with some images, you won't be able to read the text. These all seem to be pretty good. All right, so let's use this one. So let's say that we want this image to be transparent. We want to add an opacity value, and we could say like 0.4 and save, and the image is going to change, but you can see that now we can see through the image and it makes it darker, but the text is also translucent, and we can also see through that, and it's also not readable still. So we want the text to be nice and clear, but only the background image to be faded or to be translucent. So what we need to do here, what we could do as a solution, is use before. So we're going to say header before, and we're going to take this right here, the background image and the opacity value, and pass it in there. Now when you use before and after, you want to use content. Now we're not actually inserting content in the page, so we're just going to leave this blank like that. Alright, now if I save that, we can't see the image because we basically need to position it so that it's basically on top of it, or actually behind it. So we want to position this, let's say position absolute. We want to start at the top corner, so top 0, left 0. Okay, so basically right here, we want it to go 100% across, 100% height, because we want it to cover the whole thing. So let's say width 100% and height also 100%. So if we go ahead and save that, you can see that we're still having the same issue. I mean, the image is dark, but the text is not. So we're going to actually give it a z-index, and we're going to push it behind. So we're going to say -1, and let's save. And now look at the text. It's nice and bright, yet the image is still darkened. Okay, so if we wanted to change the amount of opacity, we could make it darker, even darker than this, like 0.2. 0 is going to be completely just dark. Okay, and then 1 is going to be just the full image. Anything in between, we can do like 0.5. It's kind of hard because the image keeps changing. It'd probably be a better example if it was a static image. I probably should have did that, but either way, you can see how this works. So we're adding the background image on the before pseudo selector, adding some opacity, positioning it absolute, starting it at the top left, making sure it covers the whole area, and then we're sending it back with z-index of -1. That will bring the text forward. Okay, so just remember that when you're doing a showcase image, you can do it that way. All right, so that's a pretty practical use of this, and you'll see this a lot. So in the next video, we're going to start to take a look at box shadows. All right, guys, so now we're going to look at the box shadow property, and box shadow actually takes a bunch of different values, so we're going to go over those, and we're going to just show you how to add some shadows to some divs, some elements here. So let's create a new file. We'll call it 04_box_shadows.html, and let's add our boilerplate. Say box shadows and style. Now for the HTML, I'm just going to put in a container class, and let's do 3 boxes. So we'll do dot box, and then in here let's put in h3. I'll just say heading, and then a paragraph. I'll do lorem 10, and then I'm just going to have 3 of these. So we'll just go ahead and bring this down 3 times. All right, let's open this with live server, and it should look like this. So what I want to do is I'm going to use flex to display the boxes. So we're going to take the container class, and we're just going to say display flex. Okay, so we have our boxes, and then I'm just going to add some base styling to the box class as well before we get into the shadows. So just some padding, and then let's do some margin, and let's see, let's do a background of coral, and we'll say color white. Alright, so now we have some boxes. I should probably make it a little wider, so I'm going to close this up, and we should be good, like right here. Okay, so we have boxes. Now we're going to add some shadows, so I'm going to say box shadow. Now, like I said, there's different basically options or values that you can use. So I'm going to paste in a comment right above, and we're going to put in 3 values here to start off with. So the first is going to be the offset X, next will be the offset Y, and the last will be the color. So you guys know what a shadow is. It just comes off the box. Now, offset X is going to be on the X axis. Okay, X is always going to be horizontal, Y is vertical. So let's say for the X axis, or I'm sorry, X offset, we want to do 10 pixels. And then for the Y, we'll do 10 pixels as well. And then next will be the color. I'm going to use teal. Okay, it's kind of weird colors, but I just want it to stand out. So let's go ahead and save that. And as you can see, it added a box shadow. It put 10 pixels on the X axis, 10 on the Y. All right, now I'm going to be adding different box shadow values. The next one, I want to add the blur radius because there's actually more that you can add. And one of them is a blur radius. So this is going to have 4 parameters. So I'm going to copy what I did here. And this is just going to overwrite the one before it. So the blur radius is going to be after the offset Y and before the color. And the blur radius is just that. It's going to add a blur effect to it. And it's in pixels, so let's say 20 pixels. And we'll save. And now notice that the shadows have a blur. And if these stick out too much for you, if you want them to be less, you could do like 5 pixels and save, and now it's less. And you can experiment with it. Now, you can also do negative values for the offsets. What that'll do is it'll add the shadow to the top and the left. By default, we have the shadow coming out of the right and the bottom, but what we could do is just copy. Let's copy this line here, and let's just say -5 and -5 and save. And now you can see that the shadow is actually on the left and the top. Okay, so -5 on the X is going to go this way, -5 on the Y is going to go up. All right, now we can also do a spread radius. So how far do we want it to spread? So I'm going to actually copy these comments again. And I'm just putting these comments here so you know what each of these values are. So let's grab this one here. So we'll say, let's do 3 pixels for the offset Y, offset X. Blur radius, let's do 10 pixels. And then, let's see, for the spread radius, we'll do 1 pixel. And then instead of using a solid color, I'm going to use RGBA. So it's red, green, blue, alpha. So the red, green, blue, we've went over this. So I'm going to use 0 for them all, which will make it black. And then the alpha is a transparency. So we're going to do 0.3 here and save. So this is something, I don't really use box shadows that much. I don't particularly like the look of them. Some people do. If I were to use them, it would be something like this, something very, very subtle. So and I would probably use RGBA because the less transparent, the lighter this is. If we were to do like 0.9 and save, you can see it's much darker. Now you may like that kind of look, but I don't. I think it looks really 2002-ish. So I don't use shadows that much, but nevertheless, you should know how to add them. All right, let's see. We can also do an inset box shadow, meaning that it's not on the outside, it's on the inside. So I'm going to just paste this in here, and let's say box shadow, and we can specify inset. And then we do the offset X and Y. So I'm actually going to do -3 pixels and -3 so that it's at the left and the top. And let's do teal. And save. I'm sorry, not at the left and the top. It's going to be down here because when you do inset, it's the opposite. If I wanted it to be the left and the top, I would do positive values. Shows you how much I actually use this. But yeah, we can do that if we want. It's on the inset of the box. It's not coming like from the outside. And then we can also do multiple shadows. So to do that, we could say like box shadow, and we could do, let's say, 3 pixels, 3 pixels, teal, and then we could put a comma, and let's do -3 pixels, -3 pixels, and we'll do olive. It's going to be very ugly, but just to show you how this works, if I save, you can see now I have the teal box shadow right here, and then the olive up top. Okay, so you can separate them with a comma if you want to add more. And of course, you could add a blur radius. If we do, let's do 10 pixels here and 10 pixels here, and we'll save, and we get our blur radius. Okay, so that's going to be it for box shadows, guys. Like I said, it's not something that I usually use. I don't really like the look of them, but that's how you use them. In the next video, we're going to take a look at text shadows. Hey guys, in this video we're going to look at text shadows, and this is another thing that I personally don't use that much. Just like we can add shadows to elements, we can also add them to text. So let's create a new file in our sandbox called 05_text_shadows.html. Okay, we'll go ahead and put our boilerplate in. I'm just going to close up the sidebar. Let's say text shadows. Put in our style, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to have 4 different H1s. Okay, so we're going to say H1, and inside the content, let's say welcome to my course. Okay, and I just want to add, actually let's do this, let's do times 4, and I want to add a class, a different class to each one. So let's say class A, class B, class C, and class D. Okay, so we have these different classes on each H1 because I want to give you a different example for each one. Now I'm going to do just a core styling here of font, family, and let's do Arial, and then let's make the font size pretty big. So we'll do font size, let's do 5 rem, and we'll go ahead and open that up. And actually let's do a little bit smaller, 4 rem. Good. So let's start off with the first one, which is an H1 with a class of A. And of course I could just do .a, but I just want to, I'm changing things up just so you guys remember that you can do this. You can do just A, or you can target the H1 with the class of A. So let me just paste this in. Just like with box shadow, we have a couple different values. So we have the H shadow, which is horizontal shadow, and the vertical or V shadow, and the color. So let's go ahead and add to this first one text dash shadow, and I'm going to use rem units. I'm just going to do 0.2 rem H shadow. Let's do 0.2 rem V shadow, and for color I'm going to use steel blue. So let's save that, see what it looks like. So as you can see, the horizontal shadow basically is this way, vertical shadow is going down, it's going this way, so it kind of comes off diagonal this way. Now just like with box shadow, we can also have a blur. So let's do an H1, let's do H1B. So we're now targeting the B class, which is the second one here, and let's paste this in here. So it's actually blur and then color. And I'm going to copy what we already have up here and paste this in. So let's do 4 rem. We'll do 4 rem, 3 rem for the V shadow, and then for the blur, we'll do 0.7 rem. And we'll keep steel blue. So let's save that, and now you can see that we have the blur effect. And you can use pixels if you want. It doesn't have to be rem units. But that gives kind of a different look. So next thing I want to do is white text. So let's do h1.c and let's do white text. So basically what we're doing is setting the color to white. If I save that, it's going to just completely disappear, but what we can do is add the shadow so that we can actually make out the text. So we'll do 0.2 rem, 0.2 rem. Let's do 1 rem for the blur, and let's do steel blue. And save, and it's going to look like that. So we get some pretty cool text effects here. Again, not something that I really use that much, but it's good to know. So for the last one here, I want to show you that we can use negative values. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. Let's grab this one here. And instead of it coming this way, I want it to go up. I want it to go this way. So we could add a negative value for the H shadow and the V shadow, and we'll save, and now you can see that the blur is up here rather than down here. Okay, so that's about it, guys. We probably won't use this this text shadow again. I just wanted to include it in the course in case you like it and you want to use it maybe in like a showcase area or something like that. Alright, so I will see you in the next video. Alright guys, in this video we're going to take a look at CSS variables, also called custom properties. Okay, so in documentation you might see them as custom properties, but most people call them variables because that's what they are. They're just placeholders for values. So let's create a new file called 06_variables.html, and we'll put in our boilerplate. Let's say CSS variables, and let's put our style. I'm going to just close this up. And in the body, we're not going to have too much here. We're going to put a header, and the header will have an H1. We'll just say CSS variables, and outside the header, let's do a container. And it's going to have 2 divs, so class of box. Let's do a class of box dash and then money sign, and then let's times that by 2 and enter. And each one is going to have, let's do an H3. We'll just say heading, paragraph. We'll do lorem 15. Doesn't really matter what the content is. So I'm going to copy the H3 in the paragraph and put that in this div as well. And let's just move this back and open this with Live Server. So it should look like this, and we're going to add some base styling here before we get into variables. And I know a lot of this stuff is repetitive, but it's good to keep typing it out because you get more familiar with things. So we're going to add a reset of margin 0, padding 0, and the body. Just want to make it look somewhat decent, so we're going to do a font family of Arial. I wish Arial was the default font for browsers, not Times New Roman, because it just looks horrible. Or some kind of sans serif font. So let's do a line height of 1.4, and let's do a background of light gray. Alright, so I'm going to save this. Now, before I move on to styling this other stuff, I'm going to show you how to create a variable. Now, you need to define a scope for your variables. You can define them right inside here if we wanted to. Like I could go right above and I could say dash dash. This is how you format the variable. Dash dash and then name it. So I could say, let's say light dash color, and set it to F4 3 times like that, and then I could use the variable right here by using the var keyword, opening up some parentheses, and then putting in dash dash light color. You'll see in VS Code we'll actually get a drop down with the options, and if I save we get the same result. Okay, so this is how you can define a variable. Now, usually you're not going to define it right in the same, right where you're using it. That kind of defeats the purpose. I like to use variables so I have a single place in my CSS, in my style sheet, that I can update like primary colors and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is just take this, just cut that out, and then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to define a scope to define my variable in. Now, since I used it in body, I could just do body like that and then put in the variable. But I'm going to put it in the root, what's called the root scope. So we do :root. Okay, so any variable that you create in the root scope, you can use anywhere in the style sheet. So if I save this, you can see that this still works. All right, now what I usually use variables for is primary color, secondary color, and then you usually have some kind of light gray. At least when I build sites, UIs, I have some kind of light gray, sometimes a dark gray, sometimes a really like a black almost. And I put these into variables because I might use them over and over. And then if you ever want to change it, you don't have to go to each instance of that color and change it. So let's create a primary color. And for the primary color, I'm just going to do steel blue. Okay, and then let's do a secondary color, because usually you'll have kind of a color palette to your UI or your website, and I'm going to do sky blue. Okay, so we have a primary color, a secondary color, and a light color. And then we're going to go down here and add some more styling. So let's go header. And for the header, I'm going to set a background color, and I'm going to set that to the variable of primary color. Okay, so if I save that, we get the color. I'm also going to change the text color to white. All right, and then let's see, let's text align to the center. And then I'm going to add a bottom border. Actually, I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say border bottom. Let's do 5 pixels. And then I'm going to use the secondary color. So var -- secondary color solid, and we'll save. All right, now let's do the contain. The container is actually going to be a flex box. So we'll say display flex. It has 2 items in it. So those are going to be side by side. And then in the container, I'm going to add, let's see, let's do margin auto, and then let's add a max width. And this is something I may put in a variable as well, because if you want to, for some reason, change the width of the interface or the website, you can easily do that up here. So I'm actually going to go right here and say max width, and let's set it to 1100 pixels. And then we can set that right here by saying var -- max width. Now if I save it, I shouldn't be able to go past 1100 pixels, and if I wanted to change it, I could just very easily just change it to like 960, and now you can see it gets thinner. Okay, now the boxes, I want to have the primary color as well, so let's go .box, and let's say background color, and we'll set that to var -- primary color. And let's do the same thing with the border bottom. So border bottom, we're going to set to 5 pixels. We're going to use the secondary color and solid. Okay, let's change the color to white. You could even put the text color in a variable if you wanted to. You can put whatever you want into variables, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. It really makes sense when you're going to be reusing it, or if it's something major like the width of the layout or something like that, at least in my opinion. And then let's just add some padding here. We'll say 1 rem margin, 1 rem, and we'll save that. And now you can see that it has the same colors as the header. All right, so what's great about this is if I want to change, let's pretend that this is a whole website and we're using these variables all over the place. Okay, so we have like 7, 8, 9 instances of the primary, secondary color, light color. We can now easily change this. Okay, so if we wanted to change it to like, I don't know, dark gray, and then maybe like light gray or something like that. That might look a little weird, but we'll save it. And now the whole thing changes. So it's very convenient to use variables for colors. And then things like widths and layout and stuff like that. Okay, so another thing that maybe we can do is the width of the flex boxes. So if we, actually let's go up here and let's set -- box 1 width. We'll set that to 1, and then -- box 2 width, we'll set that to 2. And then let's add the box 1 class, and we'll say, what are we doing here? We're using flex, so we can say var -- box 1 width. Copy that down. We'll change this to 2. Box 2 and save. Whoops, what'd I do? Just delete everything and save, and now you can see that there's a different layout here, and now we can easily change this. If I wanted to do maybe 3 here, save that gets bigger. If I wanted to do maybe 1 and 3 here, now I can easily change the layout with these variables. Now, everything is all the variables are defined in the root scope, but again, you can, for instance, the boxes, if we want, we can say .box, and we can move these into here, since we're not going to be using these variables anywhere else except for the box scope, right? So if I save that still works. Now, if I move the max width into the box, that's not going to work. So if I stretch this out, you'll see the max width doesn't work anymore because it's in the container. I could put this in the container scope, like I could do .container and put that in, but that's something I'd keep in the root, okay? Because it's like a main, just a main part of the site. All right, so that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, like I said, I mostly use it for primary and secondary colors, things like widths. But yeah, we'll be using variables throughout the coming projects, and that's it. I will see you in the next video. All right, guys. So now we're going to start to talk about animation in CSS, and there's a few ways to do animations. You have keyframes, which you're going to be looking at now. We also have transitions. Basically, when you animate something in CSS, what it means is you're taking a property that can be animated, such as a width, a position, a color, opacity, something like that, where you have midpoints. So let's take a width, for example. You have 0 pixels, and let's say you go to 600 pixels. Well, there's all the pixels in between, so you can go from 0 to 600 pixels. You can animate that, so you can make something grow or shrink. You also have positions, so you can move things around. You have opacity, so you can fade things in, fade things out, stuff like that. So let's get started with keyframes. So I'm going to create a new file here. I'm going to call it 07_keyframes.html. And let's put in our stuff here. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me say that and do this, but I just want to set everything up from scratch. All right, so keyframes. Now, as far as the HTML, we're going to have a single div with the class of box. That's it. Okay, we're going to create this div. Basically, it's going to be a square, and we're going to animate it. So in the style, let's start off by doing body. I'm going to give it a dark background. All right, and let's open this up. So we have a dark background, and then for the box, let's make this a white box by default. So background. Okay, we'll make this white. Actually, you know what? Let's use words, because we're going to be animating the colors. So background white, obviously nothing is going to show up because it's empty. There's no content in it. So that means we have to add a width and a height. So we'll say width 200 pixels and height 200 pixels and save. And now we have a white box. It's 200 pixels wide and 200 pixels high. Now, what I want to do is let's animate the width first of all. So when it comes to animation, we have a bunch of different properties, and then we also can combine them much like we can with many other properties like border, background, stuff like that. But let's look at each one by one. So first I'm going to do animation dash name, and I'm going to call this animate. Let's do animate 1, and let's do animate duration. Okay, so this is the time that it should take to animate. I'm going to say 2 seconds. All right, now, wait a minute, why is this giving me an error here? It's probably because we didn't create animate 1. I'm sorry, animation duration. Okay. Now, this animate 1 right here, we have to create a keyframe called animate 1. So we're going to go down below and we're going to say at keyframes and then animate 1. And you can call it whatever you want. I just chose animate 1. So we can basically specify points in the animation. Now I'm going to do this the simplest way first just to show you. And that's from and to. So we'll say from. So from, we could say like, let's extend the width. So we could say from width 200 pixels, and then to, we'll set width to, let's say 600 pixels, and let's save. And there we go. So you can see that we get that little animation. Now, since it's 200 pixels to begin with, we don't even need the from. Like we could simply say to with 600 pixels, and if I save, it still works. Now, there's some other things that we can add here. And by the way, if you want to change the duration like to 5 seconds, now it's going to take 5 seconds for that to happen, for it to extend to 600 pixels. But I'm going to change it back to 2. And notice how it only goes once. What we could do is add in animation dash iteration count. And right now it's set to 1, but let's set it to 2. And let's save and see what happens. So we get 1, 2, and then stops. Okay, now if you want it to keep going, you can use infinite. So I'll save, and it'll just keep going. Now, I'm going to set this back to 1, which is the default, and I'm going to add another property here called animation dash fill dash mode. So right now, notice that once it's done animating, once it's done stretching out, it goes back to its default of 200 pixels, right? So what if we want to keep it at that stretched out 600 pixels? We can change this to forwards. Okay, so if we save this, now it's going to animate and it's going to stay where it's at. All right. Let's see. We also have, just to show you some more properties, we have animation delay, which I'll set to 2 seconds. So now once I save, it's going to wait 2 seconds and then it's going to start. Okay, so it's going to delay the start of the animation. We also have animation dash direction, and let's set that to alternate. So if we save that, actually no, let's do alternate dash, or what is it? Alternate reverse. So then it's going to go reverse. So you can do that as well. But I'm going to keep it at alternate. And then the last one I'm going to show you is the timing function. So animation dash timing dash function. And this is basically like the motion. And you could do like ease ease in, which is gonna kind of start off fast and then like ease in, or ease out, which will start off slow and then go faster. So let's look at ease in. There's not too much of a difference, at least in my opinion. Let's make the duration a little longer. We'll say 5 seconds, and let's watch the motion here. It's going to delay, so it starts off slow and then it starts to go faster, right? Let's actually comment out the delay, but let's do ease out and see the difference. So save and see how it starts fast and then it slows down. And then you can also do ease in out, which will start off slow and end slow. So it eases out and then it eases in. All right, so those are the different timing functions that you can use. Now, obviously width isn't the only thing we can animate. Let's do color. So let's say we want the color, or I'm sorry, the background color. The color would be the text. So we want background color, and let's set that to red. And we'll go ahead and save. Now, not only is it going to extend to 600 pixels, but it's going to turn to red. Okay, it's going to go through all the whole color system, and it's going to go from white to red. Let's see, another thing we could do is its position. So let's give this a position of relative, because remember, when we add position relative, we can use parameters like top, bottom, left, right. So what I'll do is say from top 0, so basically its default position, and then 2, we're going to end up at, let's say from the top, we want to go down 300 pixels. So let's save, and now you can see that it's animating the width, the color, and also the position, moving it from 0 from the top down to 300 pixels from the top. Now, like I said, there's a shortcut for this, so we don't have to have all of these different properties. We can simply use the animation property. So I'm going to uncomment the delay, and I'm going to comment all of these out. And I'm going to show you how we can do this with just one line or just one property. So we're going to say animation. First parameter here is going to be the name of the animation, so animate 1. Second is going to be the speed, or the duration, so we'll say 5 seconds. Next is going to be the fill mode, so I want it to stop at the end, so we'll do forwards. If we wanted a delay, we could do that. We'll do a 1 second delay. And then we can do the timing function, so I'll do ease in out. Okay, so let's save that. Waits a second, and then it does the same thing. Okay, so this is just a shorter way to do all this stuff. So that's it. In the next video, we're gonna still look at keyframes, but I want to show you how we can add different points. We don't have to do just from and to. We can actually use percentages in here, and we're gonna make an element move around the screen a little bit at different points. All right, so I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so in the last video we looked at keyframes, and we looked at how we could animate different properties such as the position, the width, the color, but we just did a to and a from, so basically a starting point and an ending point. But with keyframes you can actually have more than just those points. You can use percentages, so that's what I want to go over in this video. So I'm going to create a new file here called 08_keyframes. Let's say keyframes2.html. Okay, and I'm just going to close the sidebar up here, and let's say keyframes2, and we'll put in our style tags. And I'm just going to have, again, just an ID of, or let's do, did I do an ID or a class in the last one? I just want to be a little consistent here. So we have a class of box. Let's do that same thing. So box, and in the style, let's add box. We'll make the background dark like we did in the last one. So body background 333. So the box, will give it a background color of white, and let's set the width to 200 pixels and the height to 200 pixels. I should probably spell background correctly. And we're also going to position this relative because we're going to be dealing with positional properties. So let's say position relative, and let's save this and open this up with Live Server. Okay, so we have our box. Now I'm going to add an animation here with a keyframe, and I'm just going to use the animation property instead of using all the separate properties, and we'll say animate 1. Let's say we'll have it, the span will be a 5-second span forward so that it stays where it's at when it ends. And let's do ease. We'll do ease in and out. Alright, so just like in the last video, we're going to create a keyframes, and let's call it animate 1. And before, what we did is we did to and from, but in this case I want to use percentages. So basically 0% are the starting point. We already have set here. In fact, I'm going to set the position that I want, which is top 0, left 0. Yeah, left 0. And then I'm going to say, well, at 25%, I want it to be top 0. So I still want it to be at the top, but I want it to be left, let's say 300 pixels. Now, what I want this to do ultimately is I want it to go from here over, down, back over, and up. So a complete circle, okay, complete, 360 degrees. So let's go ahead and save this and see what happens. So it gets pushed over, and it's going to end in the same spot over a period of 5 seconds. Okay, now obviously we want to add on to this. We want it to go down after. So let's go right under this and say at 50% of the basically like the timeline, we want it to be top 300 pixels because we want it to move down, and we still want left to be 300 pixels. So let's try that. We'll save, goes over, goes down, and it's going to end up in the starting position. All right, so next thing we want to do is add 75%, and it doesn't have to be 25, 50, 75. You can use any point in the timeline that you want. So here I want it to be from the left. Let's do top first. So top, I still want to be 300 pixels, but the left, I want it to be 0 because I want it to go back over. So let's save. Goes over, down, back over, and up. Okay, now I just want to make sure that at 100%, which is basically the ending point, I want it to be back in its original place, which is top 0, left 0. Alright, so now our square just does a complete square. Now, obviously we can change other properties if we want. So let's say at every point we want to change the color. So let's do right here background red. And then at 50% we'll say background green. Let's do background blue. And then at the ending point, let's do background white. Okay, we'll save that. And you can see it changes to red, to green, to blue, and to white. Now, let's do something else. We can also animate the border radius. So let's do border radius. I don't know if I showed this to you guys, but you can have more than one value, and it pertains to each corner. So let's say we want the left corner, top left, to be 50%, so basically rounded, and then the other one 0. So I save that. Notice that it turns into 50% when it goes to 25%. Okay, this corner here. Now I'm going to copy this, and then right here, let's say we want both the top corners to be rounded, so 50%, and then we'll go down here, and then we want the top So 50%, and then also the bottom right, I believe this is, will be 50%, and then by the end it should be a complete circle, so we'll just say border radius 50%, like that, meaning all corners. Okay, so that with each iteration, each corner changes, and by the end it's a circle. So, I mean, obviously this animation is it's not very practical. It's not something you would actually put in a project, but it gives you the tools that you need to be able to create some cool stuff. So you should be able to come up with some nice ideas as far as animation goes. It's not really my specialty, but you know, if you're creative in that area, you can do some really awesome things with CSS animation. So in the next video, we're gonna continue on with animations, and we're gonna look at transitions. All right, guys, so now we're going to look at transitions, which are similar to how keyframe animations work, except transitions happen basically on an event. So if you hover over something, that's a good example, you would have a transition with a property that is animatable. So like the width, the color, basically anything that we can do with the keyframe animations. So let's create a new file here called 09 underscore transitions.html. Okay, and we'll put in our boilerplate here. Close that up, and let's put our style. And for the body, again, I'm just going to have a class of box. Okay, we're going to use this element to display transitions. Now I'm going to add some other styling as well. So for the body, I'm going to do background 333, just like we did before. I'm also going to display it as a flex because the item, I want to put it directly in the middle. So I think this is one of the easiest ways to do that, is just displaying as flex, doing align items center, justify content center, and then we need a height on it. So we'll say 100 viewport heights. All right, so let's open this with Live Server. It actually opened in the wrong browser. Let me bring it over. Okay, so we just have a dark background. Now let's add the style for the box. So I'm going to do background white. We'll use color names. And let's do a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels. So this should give us a square right in the middle of the page. All right, now we're going to take a look first at the different transition properties, and then we'll look at compacting it into the single transition property. Just like with the animation, you have a bunch of different properties, and you can combine them, just like background properties, all that stuff. Borders, there's a shorthand way for just about everything. Margin, padding. So let's first look at the it's actually called transition property. Okay, so we're going to say transition dash property, and here is where we specify which properties we actually want to have a transition on a hover or something like that. So we could do all, or we could specify a specific property. So I'm going to start off with just a specific property of background. Okay, so that's the property that I want to add a transition to. And then let's add a transition dash duration. So this would be in seconds. Let's say, we'll say 2 seconds. Okay. Now if I save that, nothing happens, because the way that this works is, like I said, it has to be on some kind of event. So we're going to add a hover. So let's say box hover. And I'm just going to set the background to red. Okay, that's it. Now if I save this and I hover over it, let me just show you without the transition first. If we get rid of that and I hover over it, it just goes to red, right? We've seen this before. If I use a transition, it slowly transitions into red, and then when I come off it, it transitions back to white. Okay, in the duration of 2 seconds. So you can just use this on simple button hovers, maybe put like 1 second on the button hover, and it just gives it a smoother effect rather than just, you know, shifting right to red. Now we can also add delays if we want, so we could say transition dash delay, we'll say 1 second, and now if I hover over it, nothing's going to happen for 1 second. Actually, that wasn't really noticeable. Let's do 3 seconds, and I'm hovering over it, and after 3 seconds it starts. Okay, so that's the transition delay. We also have the timing function. I'm going to put that right here, transition dash timing function, and this we're going to use ease in out. Okay, so basically just like with the keyframes, and let's comment out the delay, and it just eases in and out, so it starts off slow and ends slow. Now of course you can take all of this and put this all together in just the transition property. We can say background. Then we can do the duration, which we'll say 2 seconds, and the timing function, ease in, out. And if we wanted a delay, we could add that on here as well, but I don't want a delay. So doing this, we should be able to comment all this stuff out because it does the same exact thing. So we'll save, and there we go. Okay, now there's other things that we can add, that we can transition. So let's go ahead and say border dash radius, and we'll set that to 50%. Now if I hover over it, notice that the transition is only working on the background color. The border radius is just switching right away. That's because we didn't specify that here. Now what I could do is I could add a comma, and I could say we also want to transition border radius, like that. And now you can see that it transitions. But what I would probably do here is an all, unless there was something you didn't want to transition for some reason, but I want everything here to transition, so that works the same way. We get a cool little effect. Now we can also do like the height and the width. So let's say we want to make it bigger. We'll say 300 pixels, and let's say width 300 pixels, and save. And now it goes from a little white square to a big red circle on hover, and it does it very, very smoothly. All right. And again, just experiment with it. Use some other properties. In fact, all the transitional properties, I'm actually going to paste in this file for you guys so you have it. So I'm going to go right here and paste this in. So transitional properties, they have to have an identifiable halfway point. So things like colors, positions, width, font weight, font size, max height, max width, opacity, outline color, visibility, width, word spacing, z-index. All these things can be different values. It can have a halfway point. It's not just like it's not binary. It's not one or the other. All right, so these are all the properties that you can experiment with. So I'll save that, and you guys will have that for reference. So in the next video, I want to look at the transform property, which you can use in conjunction with transitions to do some really cool stuff as far as rotating and moving things around the page, things like that. All right, so we'll take a look at transform next. All right, guys, so we're going to look at the transform property now, and this is a page from the MDN website, the Mozilla Docs, and it gives you a pretty good example of some of the effects that you can do with the transform. So for instance, we can rotate. Actually, I got to click off it first. This is skew, so you can kind of skew it. You can rotate. You can scale, so make it bigger. You can translate, which is basically move it around. Matrix. So we're going to look at some of these properties, and we're also going to kind of integrate it with transitions. So let's create a new file called 10_transform.html. Say transform, and let's put in our style. And again, I'm just going to have a class of box. So we're just working with this box here, and I'm just going to copy from the transitions. I'm going to copy the whole body because I just want a box in the middle. Actually, I'll just grab both of these. You can grab the hover as well, and I'll just delete some stuff. So let's paste that in, and I'm going to keep for the box the background, the width, and the height, and I'll get rid of all the hover for now. And I'm actually going to set it to 300 pixels. Alright, so let's save that and let's open this with Live Server. We have a 300 pixel wide, 300 pixel height box in the middle of the screen. And let's apply a transform. So we'll go to the box here and let's say transform. And then we're going to have an effect. Let's use rotate. Okay, so we'll say rotate, and that's going to take in whatever the amount you want to rotate. Let's say 25 DEG, so 25 degrees. And we'll save, and that's going to rotate it. Now, of course, you could use rotate with animation, with keyframes, transitions, but if you just wanted to have something tilted a little bit, you could just use it directly like this. All right, so next we're going to look at, let's comment this out. Next we're going to look at skew, which will just kind of skew it diagonally. Diagonally, is that a word? Diagonal. And let's try that. Okay, so you can see what skew does. And this is nice if you want to have diagonal lines, like in your layout, if you want to have maybe, you know, a little showcase area where you have something on this side, something on this side, and you want a diagonal line in the middle instead of just having it half and half like that. So that is skew. Let's see, let's copy this down and comment this out, and let's look at scale. So scale, let's just put in 2, and that's just going to scale it up. So essentially we're doubling it in size. We could put 3 and it'll scale even more. Alright, so let's comment that out. Now the next thing I want to show you is how to use transform with transitions. So I'm going to add a transition for all elements that are animatable, and let's do 1 second ease in out. Okay, and then let's just save that. It's going to go back down, and in our hover, let's do the rotate. So do rotate. Instead of 25 though, let's do 180. So now when I hover over it, it rotates. When I hover off, it goes back. So pretty cool. We can also skew it. Let's grab that. So now when I hover over it, it skews. And this is gonna basically you know, overwrite the rotate. And then we can also do scale. So if I save that and I hover over it, it'll scale up. Now we can also move this around the page without having to do like a position relative and then doing top, bottom, left, right properties. And we can do that by using translate. Okay, so we have translate X, translate Y, so we can move it along the X axis and the Y axis. So let's actually comment this stuff out. And let's do a transform. And then we're going to set it to translate. Let's do translate Y, and let's say 100 pixels. Alright, so let's save that. Now when I hover over this, it's going to move it down 100 pixels. So I didn't have to do like a position relative or a top, you know, top one, whatever property. It just simply moves 100 pixels. And now if I want to move it up on the y-axis, I can simply put a negative value. So negative 100 is going to move it up. And if I want to do on the x-axis, I can do translate x. Let's do 100 pixels, and that's going to go over. Okay, and if I want to go the other way, I could of course do a negative value there. Now let's say I want to move it on the x and y axis. I can just use translate, So I can say transform, translate, and this is going to take in the X and the Y parameters. So let's say 100 pixels on the X axis, 100 pixels on the Y axis, and now when I hover over it, it will go 100 over and 100 down. And of course I could use negative values if I wanted to. Now, if you want to increase performance, you can actually use Translate 3D, which I don't use all that much, but we can do Translate 3D. And let's actually comment this stuff out. So if we use Translate 3D, this actually has to have a Z value as well. So 100 pixels. And that's going to do the same thing. Okay. And I believe it increases performance if you use Translate 3D, and you can do some really cool things. I'm not that familiar with it. I usually use Translate, but it is available to us. All right, so that's the transform property. We'll be using this later on in other projects, but that's going to be it for this video, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.